Hey everybody, Erum, I really appreciate you taking the time. Fibromyalgia, neck cramps, nausea, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, wrist issues, nerve and chronic pain, and then just you're a good awareness and mental health advocate. We connected on TikTok, and I think even just last year, when we turned TikTok purple, you had joined our Zoom video.
I think that was the first time I got to experience like being with the group.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. It was different, and that was one of the whole reasons I even started my TikTok, right? To interact. Pretty much my entire life, I would say that I've had health issues and always gone to different specialists. Whether that was like really extreme eczema and trying to go to a dermatologist and they're like, oh, here's a topical cream, or going to a hormone doctor to deal with like PMS and things like that. And the symptom that really sticks out to me is having IBS, and that started, I would say I've had it for as long as I could remember, but things started getting really bad in college. And I was told by the GI doctor that it's pretty common to have like a little bit of a flare because you're in a stressful environment, drinking a lot of coffee. And he said, oh, it'll go away once you graduate.
Yeah.
But, yeah, did not go away.
No.
So pretty much in March of 2020, my mother is also diagnosed, and I went to go see her doctor, and he's not a pain management doctor. He's a doctor who has fibromyalgia himself. His name is Dr. Paul Amon. He was practicing out in Marina Del Rey, and I actually got to see him the week before he retired. And he has spent the last 40 years pretty much researching fibromyalgia because him and all of his children have it. And he basically, through his findings, he found that if people with fibromyalgia take large amounts of guaifenesin, they can actually reverse their fibromyalgia. So he gave me that diagnosis in March of 2020, and I started on the fibromyalgia protocol. And I actually have the book with me here.
Wow.
And it's literally at Barnes & Noble. And I have my little sticky notes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple components to the protocol. And I mean, I've seen the protocol work firsthand with my mother because she had chronic pain for as long as I could remember. And she was on the pain management route where she was, prescribed opioids. She was getting those like weekly cortisone shots in her spine. And the doctors were saying that, hey, there is a possibility that you might become, disabled or be needing like some kind of walking assisted device, in your 40s. So that was kind of what they had told her. So when she started the protocol, I would say within 6 months, you cycle through your pain and symptoms as you start it, and then she is like a completely different person. She's in her late 50s now, and she has so much energy. So what the protocol basically does is it targets the root issue of fibromyalgia not having enough effective ATP in the body. So as you go through the protocol, which I'm currently in my second year, so the first 2 years are pretty tough on the body. And that was, I had to take some time away to work to focus on this, because as you basically increase your dosages of the guaifenesin, you cycle through pain and symptoms. And sometimes you have symptoms, for example, that you've never had before. So right when I started, I pretty much flared and had like a huge eczema rash like all over my body. So that was kind of the beginning to say, hey, it's working, it's doing what it needs to do. And I would say at the beginning of 2020, I had about 3 to 4 hours of energy a day, honestly. And now I'm functioning at maybe, I want to say, like 7 to 9 hours, where before I completely crashed and I'm like completely fatigued. But I've definitely noticed, the changes in me, and I'm glad that I didn't have to go down that pain management route. I remember being in pain and not realizing it was pain, probably at 10 years old. I remember having pretty extreme body pain and being really, really fatigued to the point where I couldn't participate in like team sports and things like that because I would just get so winded and everybody around me, was like, you're just lazy, you just need to push, because that was kind of what they were seeing. So they didn't realize it was just a total lack of energy. I feel like people just, friends and things like that, sometimes it'd be like, well, why aren't you able to do this or do that growing up? But now I feel like for the most people, the people I have in my life are pretty understanding. They know that I'm not faking it or doing it for attention. And, if I want to walk with a friend, for example, they'll make sure I'm pacing myself and be like, hey, you want to sit down for a little bit? And then keep going. I'm like, okay.
So
thanks for remembering.
Some validation, right?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I was pretty open with my group of friends around me as to who I told, because I was noticing, like, when you're in pain all the time, it does change your personality. And I was becoming more closed off and depressed and just, like, overall more irritable, canceling plans all the time. So I wanted to give them a reason, like, why that was happening, that it wasn't anything personal. So I feel like for the most part, a lot of people did understand, but what kind of made me drift apart from certain friends was that they weren't, they knew the why, but then they wouldn't do anything to help me. So for some of my friends, they'd be like, okay, if you can't drive, we'll drive to you. So it kind of weeded out the friends who weren't kind of willing to go that extra mile for me if I needed help at times.
Kind of
so
adapt.
That did happen.
Yeah. A willingness to adapt.
Yeah, they didn't have that, unfortunately. So, like I said, the first 2 years of the protocol are very tough on the body, and then you start to gain energy and kind of gain back anywhere from 70 to 90% like activity at like the 3-year mark. So for me, I'm still at that point where, I still do get really tired, and it is really tough on my body as, the symptoms kind of cycle out, because essentially what's happening is, I have excess like calcium and phosphate that kind of will like stick to my joint areas. And those are actually palpable, so doctors are able to feel those out. And what the medicine does is it goes in and it breaks them apart. But unfortunately, my right side of my body is more affected, and I'm right-handed. So that's the tough part there, definitely, to just, go through that whole process.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your neck pain. Or neck cramps, how did that come about?
So previously, when I was working with the special needs population, specifically children on the autism spectrum. And due to some of them not being able to communicate effectively, that does lead to them having aggression. So I think I was in the field for 5 years. So I think just over time, honestly, battling it out with some of the kiddos at times when they were having aggressive episodes, I think there was a time that I might have gotten hurt and not realized it. But then I later found out that I do now have a little bit of a disc bulge, and that's the only thing I can really account it to, because I haven't been in like a major car accident or anything like that. But some of those times were really intense with those children, so I do think I might have gotten injured there, and it just kind of had like a little bit of a lasting effect.
You think the fibromyalgia made you susceptible to that in terms of just the way that your tissues are with fibromyalgia?
I do feel, I think that could be a possibility. I do feel super like weak at times. Like I definitely can't lift weights anymore like I used to, and certain things. So yeah, I would say so. Because unfortunately, fibromyalgia, we are more prone to, it takes longer to heal, because at the base, we don't have enough energy in our body to go around. So, even cuts and bruises and things like that, they do take longer. It takes longer to heal from surgery. Any injury that I've had, like a sports injury, has taken more than the 6 to 8 weeks. So I definitely think so. Actually, and then all through 2021, I was getting tested for comorbidities, because unfortunately, fibro mimics so many other
conditions,
diseases. Like it mimics like lupus and MS and Lyme disease. So I had to go ahead and make sure that there wasn't anything else going on. And then they did find, I got my PCOS diagnosis in 2021 as well. And that pretty much really sucks because the fatigue cycle of the fibro and the fatigue cycle of the PCOS kind of play into each other.
What's the
So
PCOS?
It's just a polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I didn't think I got that one. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
okay,
I've got the irritable bowel syndrome, but go ahead and talk to me about that too.
So the PCOS, they kind of refer to it as like the diabetes of the ovaries. So it can, it's different in everybody. Sometimes it's lower estrogen, sometimes it's higher testosterone, but there is that imbalance. And what really is unfortunate is when you exercise, you can trigger the hormone cortisol in your body, which then leads to not being able to lose as much weight or that fatigue. So I have to be careful with my fibro that I'm not overworking my muscles, and now I have to be careful that I'm not triggering the stress levels of the cortisol too. This interview is motivating me that I'm like, okay, I need to get back to it, and maybe joining like, you know, with you guys on Thursdays just to, you know, remind myself. It's usually like, you know, it obviously happens at the most like ill-timed moment, of course, and you're like around
movies or out to dinner,
and you're like, great,
yeah.
And the worst is when things like that obviously happen in public. But yeah, usually starting off like sweating and not feeling so good, and it is very, very painful. And kind of going through the process with the GI of like, okay, try eliminating this food, try eliminating that food. You know, it gets exhausting over time because sometimes you don't have a clear trigger for it. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's fried food or spicy foods, whatever it might be. And then you don't want to be scared to eat something, you know, it does mess with you, definitely, to be like, well, is there going to be a consequence for this later type of thing? So yeah, not so great, but I would say that while I've been on the protocol, those symptoms of mine have improved. So it's not, I'm not experiencing that so frequently anymore, which is really, really nice and a sense of relief.
Kind of giving grace to each other, right? And that you just have no idea what someone's going through.
Definitely, and it's made me a lot more mindful of that, and that was what prompted me to move back in with my family too, because I was like, if at this point in time I can't take care of my basic needs, and at a point previously I was able to, like, it's okay, I kind of just have to accept the reality right now, and like you said, give yourself grace, and kind of go from there, and be like, okay, there are people around me who can help me and that do want to help me. At the end of the day, all people really want is for someone to listen to them. So I feel like for some of my friends, like, or family, them creating that safe space for me to be vulnerable and realize that I'm not just like carelessly venting, you know, that I actually, and then for them to actually like listen and absorb what I'm saying. I feel like it has had an impact on like dating and stuff like that. Where I am pretty open about it, and I like just to say like, hey, if there's times where I'm not, you know, texting back or calling you or whatever, it's because I'm taking care of myself, or maybe I'm knocked out because I have a flare. I don't know. And I kind of let them know in the beginning that they kind of have to be flexible with their schedule if they're trying to hang out with me. And I feel like some people don't respond well to that because it goes back to the whole, oh, you're faking it, or oh, you don't really want to talk to me. So I feel like that has been difficult. And then in terms of job stuff too, I mean, this ties into my right hand as well, but, you know, I guess jobs just being more inclusive or offering, I guess, more part-time positions to people with flexible hours. I feel like now, since the pandemic, things have changed, but that was something in the past that I was struggling with because I was like, I don't know what job I can do if I can't use my dominant hand in order to type or write, or, you know, there's voice to text, but you can only use that to a certain point. So that was definitely, I would say, something that I still struggle with. At this point, you know, I probably do have to do a career change because I won't ever be able to be that physical, like with my body again, in terms of like, managing like episodes with like children, and because, you know, we would work with children up to teens up to young adults, so it would vary. So I feel like I do need to now figure out with a career change, and that's hard because, you know, in terms of like cost of living and everything like that, and being realistic, and then trying to figure out like, it's almost like for me there's like a like pre-diagnosis and like a post-diagnosis, like and I'm still I still sometimes feel like I grieve that old version who was able to do like a lot of physical things like kickboxing or swimming and not have, you know, as many issues, whereas now it's like ever since I'm 30 now, I feel like everything I can feel it a lot more when things do start to go wrong, or if I push myself, it's like there's almost always a consequence, whether that's like being in a lot of pain or, you know, having to cancel doing things like later on. I think just figuring out what makes me happy now, or what are like new hobbies that are realistic that I can do, especially with it affecting my right hand so much. Like, for example, like I used to love to draw, so now when I am having a good day and I have extra energy, I'm like, okay, let me just still prove to myself I can do a little bit, you know. But at the same time, it's like, well, what else can I figure out that I like to do that maybe doesn't involve like my hands as much? So that's kind of what I guess like the current struggle is to figure out, just to help accept like the current level of functioning and realizing that even if there are bad days, you know, my days vary so much day to day that it's hard to even have a routine or any type of structure. Whereas before, for example, I was very structured. So it's pretty much being like, hey, Erum, you did a great job. You made the bed today. Or, hey, you read a little bit of your, like, book today. You know, even if it's, like, I just have to start celebrating, I guess, like, the tiny things more versus I realize, like, at this point, I'm not going to maybe continue to have these, like, bigger accomplishments. Whereas when I had, you know, when I was younger and I wasn't, you know, suffering as much. So, yeah.
Because it can take a toll on you, you know, emotionally and mentally, and your relationships and spiritually. On top of, I mean, like going through the pain isn't bad enough, right?
Definitely. And, you know, with my mom having it and me having it, like there definitely is genetic links that makes me think about in the future. Like, you know, if I have children who end up having it, like, is that something that I can do? Am I okay with dealing with that, you know, at that point in time? So it just kind of like makes me think of a lot of different things. But therapy has helped. I actually have like a chronic pain therapist, and she does a really great job of just reminding me like, do what you can when you can type of thing. So that does help me. So like, for example, right now I'm visiting Canada, and I decided to come in the warmer months because I can't handle being in the cold at all. So I'm here visiting my cousin, and like today we like made a meal together. So like, you know, whether it's her doing like the chopping or the things that I can't do, and maybe it's like me doing something else. Like, you know, that was actually like a really fun thing for me, and it was like probably a bigger deal than most people realize.
Yeah.
Balancing out, you know, your positive and negatives, and really just being like, okay, they're both part of me. And like you said, going back to the giving grace, we don't need to, you know, be talking bad about the negative parts. It's like, okay, they're there, and, you know, that's that.
So you're visiting Canada. Where are you originally from? When you told me that, I didn't know.
Yeah, born and raised in Southern California. And I'm very lucky because, you know, having fibro, it really does affect, the cold does really affect people negatively, for the most part. So, like, you know, now it's like, if it's raining in the morning, it's like my joints already know. I'm like, oh, it's going to be cold today, or, oh, it might be raining. And now I'm just here visiting for a bit. But my hope is eventually to maybe settle down in the Florida area because the humidity is really good for the joints. And I've experienced that firsthand. So I definitely would love to live in a humid climate one day. I initially, you know, got on TikTok during the pandemic, which I know a lot of people did that. But I would search up like hashtags, like for example, like chronic pain, things like that, because I was feeling so lonely. And when I would go to the doctors, for example, I wouldn't really see people my age, you know, talking about what it was like for them. So, you know, when I started seeing like, oh, wow, there's a whole community, like I was really, like, I was shocked, but I was also like kind of relieved. I was like, okay, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, there's somebody that I can, you know, there's people that I can talk to. And actually, one of the girls that I met on TikTok, she made a Instagram group, and she basically said that whenever someone needs to vent, to a group of people who understand what's going on, they can use that to vent.
Oh,
and
nice.
I thought that was super awesome. And I always like go in and I always check that chat and see if someone needs like words of encouragement, or sometimes I'll go in and vent a little bit. But everyone, it's like you don't have to further explain what's going on. They pretty much just get it. So
Yeah.
that's really, really nice. But I definitely want to continue to be active and meet more people in the community, because I think a lot of us end up becoming some of the most empathetic people, because we realize you never really know what's going on with somebody. So always try to give people like the benefit of the doubt. And honestly, some of the like chronically ill community, like I feel like they're some of the nicest people I've met. They're just so understanding and so empathetic. I honestly try not to judge anybody anymore. So if somebody, for example, maybe is having like a freak out at a grocery store, in the past I'd be like, oh my God, they're so annoying. Why are they doing that? But now it's maybe like, hey, maybe they heard some really bad news and this is how they're coping. Or maybe they're in pain, or, you know, maybe they're really overstimulated by the grocery store right now.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I guess I kind of try to dig more into people's why. I don't try to like take things at face value. I'll just kind of be like, well, why did that happen, or why did you do that? I think that's how it's changed. Now, honestly, when I see somebody in pain, whether it's like a small injury or whatever, I'm always like, okay, what do you need? Like, what can I do to make this better? Because I just get it. And the caretaker thing that you said, you know, I saw my dad caring for my mom growing up. And there were times where it was really, really tough, because, you know, at that time, fibromyalgia was not seen as like a physical condition. It was seen more as like something mental, where you know, psychologically think
it's kind of in your head or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of him going through the process and being like, no, I believe my wife, like I'm seeing her physical symptoms, like she's not okay. And that's something actually when I joined, I think it was the live last year, with you and Nell, like I was just like, I think one of the topics of caregiving did come up, I think, because there was somebody who has a page who's specifically a caregiver. Can't remember her name right now. But she talks about like skills for that. And, you know, I think that has also shifted my perspective on dating. Like, okay, I do also have to kind of keep that in my mind, to see if they have certain qualities or characteristics. But honestly, seeing your guys' dynamic is so sweet.
Oh.
And I'm just always like, okay, like they're so cute together. Like, you know, and like you have a lot of patience. And I'm like, okay, there are people out there who, you know, can come together in that way. So
I appreciate that, and I know that she'll appreciate that as well.
If people don't struggle with physical pain, we all do have emotional pain, so we do need to, like, you know, continue to be empathetic and just ask people the reason, like, why. Asking someone why can really just open up like a good conversation.
No, it's true.
So, like, why they're feeling that way, or why did you do that like action that hurt my feelings? Like, you know, what's going on? What's the real reason? I had to coach like some of my friends and my family and brothers on is like, you know, when they're asking me questions, to maybe not ask in a specific tone.
Yeah.
Because that like further triggers how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So, you know, just telling them, hey, I need you to approach me when I'm feeling this way. Maybe, you know, I need you to go ahead and take over and start doing this without even asking me. Or sometimes I have to regulate my own tone, because when I'm in pain, I start to like pretty much, you know, to other people who don't know me, it would seem like I have an attitude.
Well, yeah.
But I'm just like trying to keep it together. And I'm like, here now, as I'm sitting and talking to you, I can pinpoint like 5-6 places in my body where my body's really hurting. But that doesn't mean I'm going to start yelling at you or have an outburst or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is still like at a certain point, you still have to be like, okay, I'm dealing with this, but this isn't the other person's fault. And they also won't know that unless I say, hey, I'm not feeling too great, you know, can we take a second, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And recently my brother actually got married, and I had to go to his wife, and I had to say, hey, you know, this is like a condition that I have. And I don't want you to think that I'm not, you know, dancing at the wedding or not participating in a certain way. Because in some of the pictures, he got some of the pictures back, and I straight had like a grumpy face in some of the pictures. Because I was not feeling good, and I was like trying to keep it together till the end of the night. And she was like, I really appreciate you telling me, and like that helps me understand you more. And there are certain duties I'm not going to put on you or have these expectations of you if you can't physically do them.
Yeah.
And that gave me a huge sense of relief, because I was like, I don't want to start this relationship off on the wrong foot where she thinks like I'm not happy that she's getting married, or something like that, where it's like misconstrued. So I do think some people, they do take it personally if you are coming off in a grumpy mood or in a not so great mood. But then again, just being like, hey, what's up? Or maybe giving them the space until they're ready to come and talk about it, and being like, okay, I'm feeling like this. But we do have to definitely try to control our tone. Like that, we can't be, of course we're not perfect at it, but
and that's where I think that's where grace comes in.
With the first diagnosis and how ill I got at the beginning of that, it was just like I felt like a burden, and I did feel like, okay, well, people are having to go out of their way to do this and that for me, and I just feel like I literally would always tell my mom, I'm like, I'm not a functioning member of society. I was like, that's how I feel, because that's how I felt at the time. And then I have to kind of, redirect my mind to be like, okay, that's not true. Like, everyone has value.
Yeah.
But that was something, I guess, sometimes when I am really down, sometimes those negative thoughts do creep back up. Like, what am I putting out in the world? Like, what am I doing? I'm just, you don't want to feel useless as a person. And sometimes if your body is not working, when your body is working against you, it's really, really hard to not feel that way. Emotionally, as soon as I accepted that the pain was going to be a part of my life, it helped me emotionally so much more, rather than just fighting it all the time. And it helped with like that whole grieving process too. But it's just like, every day is a new day, and doesn't mean that I'm not going to have positive experiences in the future because of this. You're not less than because of that. So it's something, it's a work in progress, but yeah. trying to get there. But going back to the other communication piece that you were saying, I think one of the main things about fibromyalgia, people are like, okay, you're in pain, or someone who has chronic pain, like, what does that mean? So, physically, like, I might look like, oh, she looks like able-bodied or whatever it may be. And I think I've had discussions with certain people about this, and I'll talk to them about how my pain actually feels. So, it's not just like a sore muscle. It's like a stabbing sensation or an electrical sensation or whatever it may be. There's points in time when my pain is really bad where it will literally feel like there's like a small knife in between my shoulder blades, and I'm just like walking around trying to, go along with my life. So I think letting them know, I guess, the intensity in which it goes. Like, obviously it is a spectrum, and at times it's lower in the range. But for those times when it gets really, really bad, and sometimes my pain has caused me to like have anxiety or have a panic attack because it's like completely taking over all of my other senses. I think communicating that it's not just there's so much within that umbrella term of what's going on that it's not just like similar to like, oh, I stubbed my toe, or I exercise a lot, so I'm like fatigued, but it's like, but you're not fatigued every single day waking up. And I think it's important for people to not make those comparisons, to be like, oh, I know what fatigue is like, and it's like, okay, you might, but you would get really annoyed if it continuously happened for a month. It just comes from spreading awareness, and there's lots of invisible illnesses, and one day a person might be using a cane or a wheelchair, but then the next day they're able to walk. So I think that it's just very confusing to the able-bodied community. Like, well, why can you do that one day versus you're okay the next day? It doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I think we maybe need some kind of more visual representations. Like you're saying, like for me, one of the things I feel like I'll tell people is like I feel like I'm walking through cement. Like I'm just like it's like chest high, and I'm just like trying to walk through it, but I'm just walking, like, you know, you're not going to see that though.
Yeah.
I am trying to find a picture here. I don't know if I will be able to pull it up.
Hey, Michelle.
Let me see here. Which also is a good representation.
Yeah, those.
So, part of when you get diagnosed by a rheumatologist is they do something called body mapping. So they'll go in and they'll kind of check different places in your joints and your back. And that's something, my initial mapping is something that I'll show people who want to know more information. Maybe I can send you a picture of that later. I'm not able to find it right now, but
yeah.
And it basically shows like, hey, these are the deposits, these are the fibro deposits in the body that are causing a lot of strain on the muscle, tendons, nerves, ligaments, you know, all of that, and on the bones as well.
Yeah.
And that will give people a good idea. When I was initially mapped, I had about like 50, so I had them all throughout my back and my legs, and now that I've gotten better, it's maybe gotten down to like maybe 30, but still have some ways to go. But when I show people or I make them feel it, I'll be like, hey, you want to feel my fiber bump? They're like, what is that?
Yeah.
And they're like, it feels like a muscle knot. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really go away like that. It's not really how it works. And you'll be kind of like grossed out. And I'm like, you wanted to know, like,
yeah.
You wanted to see where those deposits are at.
Yeah.
And those are pretty much parallel to where the pain usually is. And as you make progress, those will disappear in time. But I think now, recently in the past, like, you know, I feel like people are talking about their mental health and that's something that's invisible. So my hope is in time,
yeah.
you know, talking about different pain conditions will become like more commonplace too. Something interesting that I learned in reading this book and doing more further research into fibromyalgia is that if it's left untreated, it can basically lead to osteoarthritis at a very young age. And that was something that I was not aware of previously.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that your pain levels would kind of maybe remain the same throughout your lifetime or maybe at times get worse. But I guess because of the pressure of everything that's going on, it does lead to your bones becoming more brittle. And I feel like that's not very much like discussed in the community, that, hey, what's the long-term effect if you don't treat it? And pain management is not necessarily treating it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my goals moving forward on TikTok and things like that is just bringing more awareness to this protocol, because it has helped lots and lots of people, and it's given them a better quality of life while being able to stop using opioids and actually treating the root cause of it. And I guess like one of the other things is just like, for example, I guess like figuring out if there's other ways like to spread more awareness. Like, for example, like I know like Lady Gaga is somebody who has fibromyalgia. And I was recently watching an interview, I think it was from a couple of years back, and she's like, I am working with scientists and doctors to, you know, further research, you know, mm-hmm. what causes this and how it happens and everything like that. So I think just getting certain information out to individuals, and I personally, and maybe even giving jobs to people or volunteer work to people who, you know, have something going on where they're not able to hold a, you know, 9-to-5 job. I feel like once there's more awareness, we can kind of like work on that as people, because, you know, it goes back to like feeling like, okay, I am like adding something to society at this point in time. But I feel like for me, just the main thing is you really, really never know what's going on with others. So like you said, a smile goes a long way. And if we can do that, but like outside of our pain, I think that that's really huge, just to give somebody a compliment or, you know, say something genuinely nice to them. it can really like turn things around. There's been times where people have been nice to me and I'm like overstimulated by the lights in the grocery store. I'm like, oh my God, I can smell the seafood. I'm like about to barf.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, hey, hey, like, I like your hair. And I'll be like, oh, okay, like, thanks so much. Like, kind of just redirects me too. But I think just something I just want to see more awareness of moving forward is just more research and more time being put into these different chronic pain conditions.
Yeah.
Being like, okay, we all are part of this network. And so, yeah, I think that would be really, awesome to see moving forward. Maybe something I can be a part of right now as I get back into, figuring out what I want to do for my career shift, maybe becoming some type of advocate or something like that, that's still fulfilling and I can do what I need to do while still having the flexibility to work, flexible hours. And I really appreciate you guys like trying to spread more awareness and just being genuinely like caring towards other people,
Yeah.
I think that that's something that we all need more of.